what I want to do is talk about where BCS is going and why, and tell you the story of what's gone on and what's going on. And then what I'd really like to do is hear what you think about that. And then in the third section, you can ask me and we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. Is that all right? Cool. I haven't got any slides. I just want to talk to you about it. And I guess if I start by saying I've just had my little certificate that says I've been working for BCS for 10 years and no time off for good behaviour, etc. And I joined BCS really quite excited about where the organisation could go, and I've spent 10 years nearly of near-terminal frustration because of this vague idea of what BCS should be and this actuality of what it is. And about almost exactly 2 years ago, we had a new chief executive come in and said, right, we've got a strategy, no, let's build one. So as an executive team, we did what sort of corporate executive teams do. We locked ourselves in a room and we talked about if BCS was a fruit, what would it taste like and all that kind of rubbish. We didn't really. But we did talk about what BCS meant to us. We looked at all the data, we looked at all of the stuff that we had, and it was very clear from all of the data that we were kind of switched off to each other as an organisation. So things were not particularly in a good place. And so the diagnosis really was, we've lost our way, what are we here for? Right? That was the sort of the conclusion that we came to. So then we said, well, what are we here for? We went back to the charter and we came up with a very simple phrase, which was making IT good for society. And you can imagine how many people I have debated whether that is the right phrase or not since that time. And also, IT is just such a terrible word. And so when I say making IT good for society, what I mean is making computer science, computing, systems engineering, informatics, digital, whatever you want to call it, that stuff that we all recognise and we may identify with different bits of it, but that we're here to make it good for society. So that was sort of a high five moment. We've nailed it. We know what we're here for now. And since that time, we've been basically on a journey to try and discover what that means with people. And I guess it's always good at this particular point in time to ask, is there anyone who doesn't want to make IT good for society? Anyone who wants to make IT bad for society? Anyone? So that's a reasonable starting point from that point of view. You're not necessarily philosophically opposed to the fundamental idea. And it's basically what it says in our charter. We're a charity, we're here to deliver public benefit. We are also, obviously, a membership organisation. And the idea, we make IT good for society with our members. And then you start asking, who are our members? Now, there was a very interesting thing there, because actually, you're here. Why are you here? What drives you to do what you do? I don't presume to know, but it's not because your narrow self-interest is served by being part of BCS necessarily. And that you start saying, we're here to make IT good for society with the people who want to make IT good for society. So, and then you have something to contribute. So it's not just a vague general intention from that point of view, but you have something to offer. And that is not the same as saying, we are here for the IT profession. Because I don't know about you, but I have worked with many people who would go, yeah, IT good for society, I'm not so sure, IT good for me, tick. That actually there's a lot of people out there who don't necessarily stand for professional values. They might be very good and they may be very capable, but what we're looking for is that match of something to contribute and values. So that was kind of where we started from. And then you ask the question, well, we're here to do that with these people, how do we go about it, what do we do? And you end up with a sort of a grassroots and a kind of a top-down. The grassroots is you try and say to people, look, here's permission to, in whatever way that you think is important, in a communal way, like you are, go and make IT good for society. So in this area, you mentioned the sort of oil and gas industry from that. This is a big part of the local area, right? As far as I'm just assuming, and that there are things about how IT can make that better or worse. There is a collaboration to be done from that perspective. There's any number of local issues, and you have full autonomy to go and do whatever you want. From a corporate point of view, we are in a privileged position in that we're not constrained by any government policy, any other organisation's desires, any time frame from that point of view. So we are one of the few organisations that can start to look at long-term issues to do with how tech and society are interacting, and start to take the long view and try and solve them with all of the people who want to do that. Now, one of the bizarre consequences of that is it's slightly changed our view of who we're here for. So on our topics, we are working with people who have something to contribute to that outcome rather than that they necessarily fit a cookie cutter. And I don't know about what your experience is, where you're working, but the way IT is being done, the way real outcomes in the real world are being delivered is fundamentally multidisciplinary. And it was interesting that when we started talking to some people in our trustees and in our wider community, that they went, but you're not just talking about being for IT people. It's like, well, actually, if you look at our membership as it stands, we have doctors, lawyers, teachers, people from all walks of life who've come in normally because the way technology is impacting what they care about. So they end up sitting on these boundaries. And many of us find ourselves sitting on these boundaries. So we are not like the surgeons, where you can go, if someone is cutting into you with a knife in a hospital, they are either A, a surgeon, or B, you are having a bad day. That fundamentally, you know if someone's a surgeon, you don't know if someone's a surgeon. In IT, we don't know, those boundaries are incredibly blurred. So we started out with 4 areas we were looking at for whether there was a big thing that BCS needed to do. And those 4 are still continuing in various ways, but they are basically health and care integration around a person. And where we've got to at the moment is the realisation that, as I was saying to your colleague earlier, that actually what is missing, and this is particularly south of the border, because everyone tells me, and it's entirely believable, that north of the border you are so much more squared away on health and care, but the missing component of moving forward is not a technology plan, not an organisational plan, but people who care, people who are crossing disciplinary boundaries and working together. So I'm involved in trying to bring together a number of professional bodies and do something as a backplane and front of house. So we're trying to set up standards and things that are kind of functionally useful to support people who want to make health and care IT good for society. And the foot forward is saying that we all care, we have the same objectives, let's actually act like it, let's step outside of our professional silos, our organisational silos, and start collaborating. And that is one of those crazy things that you would only go at if you didn't mind repeated failure along the way. Another one is personal data, sorting that out, going to be easy, I think we're going to be done by Christmas. But basically that one is probably in some ways a more difficult problem than health and care integration. In that personal data, the way we are operating, individuals hate it, they're starting to lie to companies, they don't trust companies. Companies hate it because they are getting more and more of a brand reputation risk, information security is costing more, and the board of organisations never know if they're doing enough or the right thing. And their customers are lying to them and getting annoyed with them. And if you are a very well-behaved, lovely company that wants to look after its customers, it is getting increasingly hard to treat them in a way that is consistent with what you want to do when it comes to personal data. Because you want, when you switch into marketing mode, you kind of want to profile them and get everything and so on. And then for governance, much of the public task needs to be delivered better through better use of personal data. But government relations with the citizen around personal data are also under a lot of stress. So there's this massive static pressure in the system, and everyone is looking just in a narrow horizon. Can they move forward a little bit? Can they inch it forward? And so if you take health and care, people are going, look, just let us use it because there's a lot, you're going to save your life. And that is a valid argument, but there is a longer term vision we need to get where we manage personal data very differently. So we are trying to stimulate debate around that. We are bringing together experts under that aegis of making IT good for society to not have that short-term business case conversation, but that long-term, where are we going? Capability. A huge amount of what BCS does functionally is to do with supporting a capable IT profession. And that remains incredibly important, because there's sort of good IT is needed to make IT good for society. But there is an added component to it, obviously, which is basically ethics and accountability. So any software testers in the room? So I'm going to pick on you then, but it's not going to be too painful. But do you think that it is okay for a software tester to let into the wild software that can't be used by a blind person or someone else with some other disability?
It depends on the industry.
Okay, good answer. I like that answer. But as a general rule, do you think it is going to be good or bad if a blind person can't use a system?
You'll normally have a set of integration tests.
Yeah. So you're saying you're doing the job professionally, and you will make sure that is the case.
In my previous profession, this one less so oil and gas. It's not as.
No, that's fair enough. If you're just but you get my point.
Yes.
And I think that if everyone thought like that in software testing, how come the software isn't better? So there is a huge thing to be done, for example, with software testers around accessibility, because I don't think it's acceptable that something like 20% of the population who have some kind of disability over the course of their lifetime can't use a lot of systems that are being designed and put out from that perspective. So on that, the idea is that a capable, accountable, ethical, right-thinking set of people building and delivering and testing and managing our software and systems is good for society. And the last one is around education, and in some ways that's our most mature area, because I think it was about 8 years ago, I was in a room and there were a bunch of people saying it is terrible that we're not teaching computing in a structured way to children. We're sort of selling themselves short. Two groups came out of that. One formed Raspberry Pi, which has been enormously successful. The other one formed Computing at School, which is part of BCS. And that was a long-term mission to create a UK-wide network of teachers who can support each other and deliver computing in the classroom. And I had one of those funny moments earlier this year, because I've been to a Raspberry Pi trustee dinner. I've got a Raspberry Pi 3, which I was disproportionately excited about, and plugged it into my telly. And my 8-year-old daughter, who was born around the time of that meeting, where we were railing against how awful it was, she loaded up Scratch, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a basic sort of drag and drop algorithm package. And she made a cat dance, and the lights changed and all this kind of thing. I didn't even know she'd been doing that. Clearly, I need to take more interest in my child's education. But it was just so exciting, because it wasn't, I don't fear for my daughter in the sense of that she will not have some good career, but I do fear for a generation who are going to be slaves to computers rather than in charge of them. And so that is still a continuing project, a continuing program, because it's hardly started. But it's very heartening to know that when we get together around a purpose, when we build coalitions of people, because it wasn't just BCS that did that, it was actually all those teachers who wanted to do it. It was actually Google and Microsoft giving us really quite substantial amounts of money. It was the Department of Education saying yes to things rather than no. It was Eric Schmidt from Google coming and slapping the cabinet around saying, you're selling yourselves down the river. It was many volunteers who've worked together from universities, from schools, and from commercial organisations to deliver that. So that is the fundamental future of BCS. We're going to change things to make IT good for society, and in so doing we develop a lot of things that we want to use that are going to help us. But the reason that we do it first and foremost is because we're a group of people who share that ambition, that we're proud of what we do day to day, we're proud of the values that we have. We know that we can only do things when we work together outside of our organisational structures, and we want to do it. So that becomes the fundamental value proposition of BCS. It is not a bundle of services and publications from that point of view. It is kind of a cause. So what do you think?
How do you make it happen?
Well, that is the rub, in the sense that my job is to kind of do a few different things, and then you all have a role, we all have a role, and my job is to kind of come around and go, look, here's the big flag, and do this. And so I've been visiting a lot of branches and specialist groups and talking to a lot of members like ourselves to try and not just say, look, there is a new directive from somewhere else that says you should do these things, but to have a face-to-face conversation and actually to not just to sort of tell you, but to get feedback on it. The other bit, my role is to try and create a banging together of the communities, what we do from a policy and public affairs point of view. Behind, in a lot of the infrastructure in our organisation, we've done a massive technology platform shift so that we can actually do more and better and faster. And we are in the process of endlessly discussing this. BCS is oil tanker, and it's a group of a very large number of people who need to be brought into doing things differently, and that is not a quick thing. But there are an awful lot of things that we can do to exemplify it. So what I'm suggesting is that aegis of making IT good for society as a kind of framework for thinking about what you were going to do, it could be potentially very valuable. So, for example, when I was talking in Guernsey, I said, what are the big issues locally? And they said, well, the hospital is going to be changing its systems. And I was like, well, that's massive, and that has a huge impact on everyone in the island. So why don't you get together all of the groups who are interested and host some meetings? Why don't you get some other BCS experts in to talk about it? And it's a bit of a mindset shift from that perspective, but it's not a big mindset shift in the sense that you are already doing some of those things. Another part of it is that we just think it's too hard being a volunteer, and we're trying to come up with ways where you can do more without having to put in quite so much paperwork. And another part of my job is trying to make sure that BCS as an organisation gets credit for it, and that is a long road of building up relationships in the media, in government, with politicians, and with lots of different stakeholders. And so all of those things, particularly around these topics, we're doing right now. And I think that we will continue to discuss and debate what this means for a very long time. My posture on it is now, having tested it, having looked at it, having thought very hard, talked to a large number of people about making IT good for society, with the caveat about the IT description, I think it's right. But the next question is always, what do you think we should be doing? Or what can BCS, what can an organisation making IT good for society do to actually make a difference? So being clear about what we're here for, and then very open to what we should do. Gosh, that was a long answer, I didn't mean to be that long.
I guess one of the challenges, it does sometimes seem very London-centric. And one of the challenges, you give some very interesting and good examples about engaging with the Department of Education and so on.
Yeah, I'm really aware.
Whereas in a Scottish context, with the Scottish Government, we would want to influence on following similar examples, I guess. But it's a different organisation, they work to different timetables.
Yes.
It's a big challenge to figure out how to engage effectively in both areas, I guess.
Yes, and I don't come with a solution, but I'm very aware of the problem. And one of my opposite numbers on the community side is Ian Thompson, who's a trustee and vice president from Edinburgh, and we talk about this very regularly, and that we are exploring how we can be both more regional within England and more focused on the UK nations that are in danger of being in our attention, the poor cousins. And the other thing is that that there is an awful lot of innovation and things to be learned from north of the border
there's also policy that we would have a legitimate case for us to be in there trying to influence.
Yes.
Because they've got broadband strategies and education strategies and all sorts of things going on that we should really be in the middle of, but we tend not to be.
So I think, like I said, I don't have a solution to it. I mean, we are talking about lots of ideas about how we might structure our resourcing differently. But I think, any momentum about this comes not from people like me, but from people like you. And I think that a natural consequence of this is that sort of structures like BCS in Scotland need to be far more important and a focal lens for having those conversations. Because I think that we've chosen those 4 topical areas. There's no reason why they don't apply north of the border, but there's no assumption on my part that that is the most pressing thing in Scotland. And I think that if you know, there is, how do I put this? There's more, in some ways, there's more resource available that we call upon as a set of communities, you know, because we can do more, and that there is an awful lot more that we can do if we stretch our hands out and want to collaborate. And my job is to see how we can get you more foundational support locally.
One thing I'd like to see is a number of meetings that take place in London is, of course, I looked at it, I thought that sounds really interesting, it's in London.
Yes.
You know, you're not going to go down for a 2-hour meeting
Yeah.
along those lines. I would like to join in those live streaming.
Yes. I mean, having a facility in London, the fact that something like 50% of the IT profession can reach London within sort of an hour or an hour and a half kind of thing, always creates this sort of this London centricity. And I'm not saying, and therefore you have to accept it and shut up. But like I say, I think we need to be much more both regional and local and national in our thinking about how we go about community.